Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. As always, my name is Jay, and in this video I want to talk about 3 rules that I'm really liking right now in Warhammer 40K that I like to use and help me win. I've gotten a handful of games of 10th edition under my belt. Not a lot, I've played 6 or 7 games so far, but there have been 3 rules that I don't normally think about, and I've had them used against me, and I've been using them as well, that I think are pretty powerful, that are not I call them under the radar rules. They're not the standard ones that everyone thinks about, you know, like the ability to cause mortal wounds, or indirect fire, or you know, how super heavy walkers can see over everything, right? With towering. So there's several rules that everyone goes to, like towering, or because all the towering models got points increased, all the indirect fire models got points increased because they're so powerful. A lot of things that cause mortal wounds, you know, are pretty powerful. But I just wanted to talk about 3 rules or keywords or just simple stratagems that most armies have access to, that are really powerful, especially in combination with other things. And I've been really enjoying them, and they're things that, as I said, I didn't normally think about when I was building my list originally, and now I'm really thinking about them because they really do affect my game, and the game, as I said. So, let's start off here. The first one is, of course, Scout. I think Scout is a really important rule. Not a lot of people build their lists with a lot of Scout models up front. I've noticed that when I'm playing. No, but Scout can be pretty powerful. You know, the ability to move your models before the first game turn is really cool. And seeing as the boards are smaller and more tight-knit in 10th edition, like 9th edition, but larger, smaller than 8th edition, and how tight-knit how tight the terrain is, the ability to scout is great because it helps put you in an optimal position for turn 1, especially if you get to go first. I've had an opponent do a bunch of scout moves on me, and then all of a sudden I went, ooh, that distance has been really closed. I totally forgot about scout. You know, in my head I just didn't ask about scout, I didn't really think about it, and then all of a sudden my opponent moves a bunch of vehicles 9 inches, and all of a sudden they're out of sight, or they're in a different line of sight, or they have line of sight on something else, or they're closer to the objectives, they're closer to the center of the table. Huge, right? They are a game changer, and I just didn't think about it when I was originally building my list. Now I'm really in my head thinking about scouts. So, for example, if I was building a Genestealer Cult army, it's just another great reason to have the Achilles Ridge Runner, because the Ridge Runner has Scout 9 inches. And so, because it can Scout 9 inches, again, it's a great vehicle to have the heavy mining lasers on. So with Scout, you can then move them 9 inches before the game's even begun and get them even closer or farther away from your opponent. You can use it to just really adapt to the situation, and it puts you in an optimal situation. And again, your opponent usually kind of forgets about Scout moves. It's kind of I think it's kind of one of the underused parts of the game. So number 1, Scout, right? As I said, Scout, I think it's a really great tool, and it's a great way to adapt to your opponent's army, the setup, the terrain, and the overall game. So, Scout, number 1. Number 2, I'm going to say Smoke. Smoke has been a great lifesaver for me, and it was a great lifesaver for one of my opponents in one of my games. Smoke is a great keyword, and the reason is, if you have Smoke, you can spend one command point to tap the stratagem Smoke Screen during your turn. So after your opponent has declared a target, you can spend a command point and use the stratagem Smoke Screen. So I love to use it, for example, on my Shadow Sword, because then it gives the Shadow Sword the benefit of cover, and it gives the Shadow Sword stealth, which is so -1 to hit, which is great because usually your opponent is going to be stacking something really scary to shoot at your big vehicles. So having Smoke, -1 to hit, and this one saved my butt. It would have been 3s to hit, instead it was 4s to hit. My opponent rolled 2 3s. Love it, right? So it saved, and then also obviously the benefit of cover just helps because like a big vehicle, then all of a sudden it just helps keep it alive. So smoke, very simple rule. You know, it's a stratagem that a lot of armies have access to, but helps keep your vehicles alive. And like it obviously, it's one of those rules that was used back in the day. You know, so many times ago, you can pop smoke rather than shooting your vehicle. You just pop smoke, and that way it would have similar benefits in previous editions. But again, for one command point, smoke and smoke screen is a great combination to help keep your vehicles alive. And just one of the rules I didn't think about a lot when building my lists originally, but I think it's going to be used a lot in my future games, and it's going to help keep my vehicles alive for sure. And finally, number 3, of course, lethal hits. The reason why I love lethal hits, and I think lethal hits isn't as spoken about as more, like devastating wounds tends to get more attention than lethal hits, because devastating wounds, of course, causes mortal wounds to your opponent on a 6 to wound. Depending on the damage, or sustained hits gets a lot of attention, but lethal hits, I really, really like lethal hits. And here's why. Lethal hits on a 6 to hit causes an auto wound. Very straightforward. Lethal hits on a 6 to hit causes an automatic wound. And the reason why I like it so much, and it doesn't get enough attention, is the fact that in this edition of Warhammer 40K, in 10th edition, it's all about trying to wound your opponent, right? Most times you're going to have no problems, very few times, hitting your opponent. You're not going to have a problem hitting your opponent. It's the to wound rolls that are causing pain in your heart, especially when it comes to vehicles, right? Vehicles are so much harder to wound in this edition, and that's what really keeping vehicles alive, is their toughness, and the fact that most guns are just not higher strength than the vehicle's toughness is. So, if I was firing las cannons at a Land Raider, I'm going to hit on 3s, and in fact, I could probably even stack some things so I'm re-rolling the hits, but I'm wounding most vehicles that are worth wounding, that I'm worth targeting, on 5s. So, 2/3 of my shots will hit, 1/3 of my shots will wound. That's not very good. And I know that Space Marines and some other armies have, can re-roll their to wounds, but still, it's very tough to wound your opponent's vehicles in this edition of Warhammer 40K. Lethal hits is amazing for helping that, right? Because lethal hits, again, on a 6 to hit, auto wounds. So now you can fire bolters at a Land Raider, and just enough firepower, you might get some 6s. And I know you're saying it's not a really high AP shots, but you're just doing volume of fire, to hopefully your opponent will fail some saves. Or, one of the new models in the Leviathan box set was the Apothecary Biologist, and he has lethal hits. And so, of course, you can attach him with 3 different squads. And once again, these 3 squads are the Aggressor Squad, so access to a lot of firepower, the Eradicator Squad, awesome, and the Heavy Intercessor Squad. And I really do like the idea of attaching with a Heavy Intercessor Squad, because then all of a sudden you can fire heavy bolters at vehicles, and the odds are you're probably going to get like a 6. And then you auto wound, right? And it helps with auto wounding your opponent. And I think that by skipping the step of the to wound roll, obviously, you're greatly increasing your chances of causing wounds and in their opponent failing saves, and just the sheer number of volume of shots, right? The other, because I know most of the attention goes to like devastating wounds or twin linked. Twin linked gets you a re-roll, your save too, but it's better just to not have to make the roll to begin with. And you can stack lethal hits with sustained hits, for example. So again, let's go back to the example of the Heavy Intercessor Squad. The Heavy Bolter has sustained hits 1. So on a 6 to hit, not only do you get an extra hit, you also get an auto wound. Huge, right? And I think that once again, by adding the, because Apothecary Biologist is such a cheap, 55 points, add it to a squad, instantly adds these rules that you can then interact with other rules. It really increases the deadliness of your squad. I think your opponent's going to kind of ignore them initially and then realize, oh wait, that squad can actually hurt me a lot more, because once you add in lethal hits, it actually, makes it much easier to wound. as I said, because you're causing auto wounds, which is nice. But that's it. Those are 3 rules that I've really loved so far that I think are under the radar, that are not used as much. What do you think, obviously? What do you think? Leave comments in the comment section below. What are some rules that you think are underused or underrepresented, not really focused on in this edition of 10th edition of Warhammer 40K? Let's create a discussion and discussion why. Are the ones I chose obvious ones? I don't think, maybe not. I don't think so. You know, as most people focus on devastating wounds as if are twin linked, or again, indirect fire, towering models. Yeah, what do you think? Leave comments in the comment section down below. As always, stay tuned for more videos. Please like this video, comment in the comment section down below, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so. And until next time, this is Jason. Happy painting.